Hello and welcome to another video by Day Night Gaming. This video will be reviewing Outriders, the video game. Outriders is a third-person looter shooter developed by People Can Fly and published by Square Enix Ltd. Outriders can be played on PlayStation 4 and 5, Xbox One and Series X, as well as PC via Steam, Epic Games, and Xbox Game Pass, as well as streamed on Google Stadia. Outriders is set in a dark, post-apocalyptic future where humanity has fled Earth and journeyed to the dangerous planet of Enoch. Here, you and up to 2 other players are Outriders and can choose from 4 distinctly unique classes: the Devastator, Pyromancer, Technomancer, and the Trickster. Outriders at its core is a story-driven RPG looter shooter, and as such, each of the 4 classes has 3 trees that you can progress through as you level up. As you play through the story, you will unlock access to new areas, each with their own set of quests and unique environment. And after beating the game, you can still progress your character by going through the endgame content known as Expedition. It is important to note that while there is an online component to the game, it technically is not an online live service type of game. As of time of review, Outriders does not follow the normal games as a service model. There are no egregious microtransactions currently implemented in the game, and currently all content in the base game can be achieved or unlocked without paying any extra money. Granted, with that said, People Can Fly has stated that they do intend to release paid DLC content in the future. Now on to the review. First off, I must stress that this review is of my own opinion and is completely subjective. Everyone's taste can differ wildly, especially when it comes to video games. So let's start with the story. While I do often hear people say they enjoyed the story, I must say I personally found it extremely obnoxious. There was an overabundance of foul language used, with frequent F-bombs littered throughout the story. I pretty much rolled my eyes when one of the vendors early on basically greeted me with an F-bomb. Let me preface that I normally do not mind a little foul language here and there in my video games. It just got really tiresome due to the almost comical heavy saturation in almost all dialogue focused cutscenes. Along with that, the story content is predictably depressing as it forces this grim dark future into every crevice of the plot. I do not want to spoil any of the story beats for those interested in playing the game, so let's just say the game is very visceral in both gameplay action as well as in the story. Please remember, this is just my own opinion and opinions may vary from person to person. Aside from that, I found that there were a bit too many cutscenes in the game. Now I can understand cutscenes for story moments and dialogue, but there are also cutscenes for opening doors, or jumping 1 foot across a small gap, or climbing up a 3-foot rock face. Thankfully, most cutscenes can be skipped. Also, the cutscenes use way too much shaky cam. It's almost comical how violently the camera would thrash about on the default setting. On this note though, it's awesome that the developers added a setting that can toggle the ferocity of the shaking. After I found this option, I proceeded to lower it to the minimum, and this made watching the cutscenes a bit more tolerable. Another nice touch was that your character model would be used in the cutscenes, pretty much using the same gear that you normally would be wearing, with the exception of the helmet. Okay, so now let's move on to the technical aspects of the game, as it is very important when discussing online multiplayer games. Now before we continue, I must reiterate that this game is not, as of making this review, a games as a service. Also, I must state that I personally played on Xbox Game Pass, and that my computer uses a 2080 GPU and an i9 9900K CPU with 32 gigs of RAM. First off, I won't lie, I have experienced a multitude of bugs and glitches in this game. Many of these bugs were outright infuriating. Some of the most egregious were bugs that prevented me from continuing the game. There were often times where I would be going through a quest only to find that my quest tracker wants me to go through a gap in the wall that should be clickable but was not. Because I could not click the terrain, I would not be able to progress to the next area of the map to continue my quest. In order to rectify this, I had to circumvent the game by returning to the lobby and loading to an earlier part of the story, which was extremely frustrating. Also, I found the game would crash a bit more than I would like. Heck, sometimes it would crash just trying to start the game. I almost expect to have to try reloading the game 2+ times before the game actually launches. Also, the frame rate can have some serious dips on my system, which is understandable with all the particle effects used throughout this game, but it's extremely jarring when it happens during cutscenes, as my eyes would become hyper focused on what's happening on the screen. This is extremely apparent with fire effect, and I can only surmise that the use of ray tracing is taking my card to the limit. It's because of this, and I would haphazard a guess, that anyone trying to play Outriders on either an Xbox One or a PlayStation 4 will probably have some degree of frame lag, especially since there's a lot of fire effects in this game. Okay, so now let's move on to the gameplay, as this is probably the most important aspect of this genre of game. Like stated earlier, Outriders is a co-op online looter shooter that can be played with up to 3 players. There's a lot to talk about, so let's start off with the multiplayer support. Remember, I cannot stress this enough, but Outriders is not, as of making this review, a games as a service. With that in mind, while this game could be compared to other online shooters, it definitely does not have the same monetary backing that games like Destiny have. And while I absolutely love that there are no egregious microtransactions in Outriders, I must say that it can be hard to find other players when queuing up for Party Finder. I found myself running solo for most of the story progression, and after I beat the game, in the beginning, I found it hard to find other players in the same tier as I was when engaging in endgame content. I hope that when I get to the highest tier of expeditions, that there will be better matchmaking, as I would assume there are more players in that difficulty range than when in the lowest tier. That being said, lucky for me, I had a few other mates that downloaded and played Outriders with me, so I was still able to engage in multiplayer, provided they had time to join me. And the nice thing about this game is it has cross-play support, so even though I was playing it on Xbox Game Pass, I was able to play with my other friends who had it on Steam. That's awesome. So next I want to talk about the gunplay. While of course this is completely subjective, I found this aspect of the game to be extremely fun and engaging. It is extremely visceral and fast-paced. The enemy AI might cover and try to snipe you, but at the same time, there will probably be some form of rushers coming at you, and possibly some flankers as well. My character was always on their toes, dashing from place to place, frantically just trying to hold my own. I was literally playing by the seat of my pants, and my ability cooldowns felt very impactful, and I was able to use them quite frequently, which really helped amp up the power fantasy up to 11. And the nice part about Outriders is there's a scaling difficulty system implemented in the game, which would help me tailor the difficulty to my personal preference. This comes in the form of world tiers during the main storyline, and after beating the game, there's a new system called challenge tiers. Both start at 1, and as of making this review, end at 15. This is great because as you play through the main story, if you're doing well, the game will level up your world tier. And if it gets too difficult, you can always temporarily lower your world tier at any time. Of course, to incentivize harder difficulties, the game rewards you with better drop rates if you use a higher difficulty. This keeps the gunplay interesting and action-packed, but doesn't bog you down and make the game unbearable at the higher difficulties. Okay, so let's move on to the loot. Probably one of the core tenets of this game is the loot grind, and to be honest, out of all the looter shooters I have played, I prefer this system the most. Of course, this is all personal preference, but what I love about the loot system in Outriders is all gear in this game can be improved in some way, and even the lowest rarity of gear can be upgraded from basic up to epic tier and possibly rival legendary gear. This is an absolutely amazing system. Also, gear is multifaceted. Multiple layers of stats can be improved. Not only that, but up to 2 ability mods can be on a gear, and you can even change one of the 2 to a totally different ability mod if you so choose. Heck, even non-legendary weapons allow you to change its firing type. So let's say you found an assault rifle that shot 1 bullet at a time with its firing mode. You could change it to burst fire if you so wanted. This system is great. In fact, for my playthrough as a trickster, at a low level, I found an assault rifle that I really enjoyed playing with, and I continued to upgrade it all the way until I beat the game. In fact, as of hitting endgame, up to challenge tier 10 out of 15, I am still using the same blue assault rifle, and considering my playstyle, it still performs better than the 4 legendary weapons that I have found. up until now. Aside from that, I am also using 2 armor pieces that I found early on that I upgraded from green to purple that I still use, and they work just as well as the other 3 legendary armors that I have currently equipped. This is amazing. I absolutely love this gear system. Another thing that's really cool is every gear that you pick up has its aesthetic look to it, but that aesthetic look also gets put into your transmog database. So let's say you found a rifle that looks really cool, but you didn't really like the stats of it, and then you found another rifle that has really cool stats, but you don't like the look of it. You can transmog it to look like a previous rifle that you found, which is really cool, and that also works with armor. So your character customization doesn't stop with just having the best gear. You can actually have it look however you want it to look like, of course within the confines of whatever gear you found. Now, it is important to note that I did enjoy this game thoroughly. While I might not have liked the story, the gameplay in its core is actually pretty fun. So I could definitely recommend this to a friend, but I always have to tell them as a disclaimer that there are a lot of bugs in this game, and it is very hard to find other players via matchmaking. But if you got people to play with, the game could be really fun. I definitely recommend checking it out if you're a fan of looter shooters, especially since this game is not games as a service. So once you buy the game, that's pretty much it. You don't have to spend any more money. All the transmog and all the loot that you find in the game are in the game, so that's really nice. It's very rare to find games like this nowadays. Also, it's very important to note that there are a lot of bugs, like I stated before, and there is a lot of foul language. So if either of those turn you off, I highly recommend avoiding the game. But if you don't mind those, if you can tolerate them, then maybe perhaps check out the game, give it a try. You might enjoy it. Thank you. Hope you enjoyed this video. And if you did, consider hitting that thumbs up, hitting that subscribe button, and ringing that bell for future notifications on videos that I might be posting in the future. And in case you're interested in supporting the channel even more, I do have a merch website at streamlabs.com/DNGdangerous/merch. And until next time, take care. Goodbye.